very first thing I want to do is look at quickly as we can, some of the things that we talked about over the last 16, 17 weeks, all right? But what I want to use this as is an introduction into what this second part is and why we need it, all right? And then we'll start in that second part next week. So we started out almost 4 months ago now, where we said that not only does a watch imply a watchmaker, but a camera must have a builder. And if that's true, then it would seem like the eye was more sophisticated than a camera and it would need a designer. We also talked about the fact that it seems more reasonable that there was a mind that came first rather than matter coming first. We spent a lot of time on that in each one of the lessons. If matter came first, then where did the mind come from? It had to come from just chemistry and electricity. If that's the case, then how do we get our logic and our feelings and our thinking and our love, hate? I don't understand how this can come from a rock, all right? Even with chemistry and electricity over millions and millions of years. But the evidence, I think, seems to show that a mind came first and that this mind created the other mind, which is ours. We looked at symbiotic relationships. I think you remember hopefully some of those. The idea that there are things in the universe that depend on each other to the point where if one wasn't there, the other couldn't survive. So they couldn't evolve independently. So it seemed like evolution is not working in those situations. And some of this doesn't even have to do with living matter. It has to do with things like planets in the solar system, right? The Earth and the Moon have a relationship that's extremely important for life on Earth. The moons in Jupiter have a relationship with Earth itself to support life. And there's lots and lots of these kinds of relationships, both living and inert, that would seem like it would take almost impossible chances for them to come about that way. We talked about irreducible complexity and intelligent design. We looked closely at the bacterial flagellum and the kinesin, at the cell, and some of these other things that are so complex, and they have to be put together in order for them to work. If they're in pieces and they have to evolve this piece and this piece and this piece, then how can they ever work? We also looked at the odds of these things happening by chance. We found that the probabilities of some of these things happening by chance was ginormous in a sense. We looked at the codes that are prevalent in the universe, whether it's the DNA code or whether it's a lot of the other things that are imprinted in some particular way, and that this is usable information. It's not random information. The only mechanism that we know that is capable of generating such codes is a mind. And that happening by chance is impossible. When looking at the DNA, we find a system that is even more sophisticated than anything man's ever built. How could that happen? We even looked at the artistic and aesthetic sort of things with the Fibonacci sequence. There are others of these. Fibonacci is just one that I like to bring up because I've studied a little bit. But there's common beauty in things, common design in things. How can rabbit reproduction, flowers, lettuce, apples, bananas, music, pine cones, hurricanes, ocean waves, galaxies, all these things have something in common unless they were designed by a designer for us to see. Then we talked about the fact that Darwin has a one tree, one kind, one tree for all kinds, I'm sorry, method of looking at how we got here, as opposed to the Bible saying that we have one tree for each kind, and that they were created dogs, created cats, and what we've never seen anywhere in any of the studies is that we have dogs becoming cats, cats becoming dogs. We got different kinds of dogs, we got different kinds of cats, we got different kinds of all these different kinds of things, all right? What we don't have is a crossover between them. We also looked at intermediate forms, or the lack thereof. Where do we actually see intermediate forms in between the different types of animals? Now, they have come up with quite a few examples that they claim work, but we looked at a bunch of those. They were all frauds. They were all misinformation at minimum. And when they look at the fossil record displayed in what's called the geologic column, that geologic column is nowhere on Earth to be found. They have a piece of it over here, and a piece of it over here, and a piece of it someplace else, but they don't have any place where they can go and actually say, okay, there's this level, and this level, and this level, and this level, and this level, all in one spot. It's easily made up, and it's deceptive as far as I'm concerned. But what they do have is mass fossil graves. It isn't that this happened little by little. This happened in catastrophe. We take a look at things like jellyfish that would disintegrate if it took any time at all. This had to be almost instantaneous. But little dragonflies and that sort of thing. Mass graves of fish in the middle of eating, animal forms giving birth, boom, gone, just like that, fossilized. Trees going through several different, that right there shows me that millions of years didn't fossilize that tree, okay? Even though they would say that that's one geological level, and in millions of years later, this is another one, and then that's another one, and that's another one, that tree goes up through all of them. It's not possible. Absolutely not possible. And they don't have a real good explanation for it. We looked at a couple of more specific things, like one of the biggest ones right now that evolutionists is using are intermediate forms such as the whale. And we looked at two different evolutionists explaining these three species right here as a direct descendant from, and we said could be a hippo, could be this, could be a lot of different things, but whichever one they choose, they would go through these particular species. But we found that even some of those were faked. And the people that did it admitted that they were. And that those are not intermediate forms, that they're either mammals or they're fish. They're not a half-breed. And then Archaeopteryx, which was supposedly half bird, half reptile. Half dinosaur, so to speak. It's on its way from one to the other. And we found quotes by evolutionary scientists themselves that say, no, it's a bird. It is not an intermediate form. We looked at one of the other so-called proofs that's been around for a long time, and that's the experiment done with peppered moths in England by this guy named Ketterwell. The data that was done by experiments later trying to show this, replicate the same thing that he did, shows that the data doesn't match. Plus, the moth didn't change into anything else. All right? They didn't change into anything else. They just possibly had more of a white ones or dark ones depending on the situation. That's not evolution. That's simply adaptation. And even when they tried to spark life in a test tube, they came up, yes, with some amino acids that would be present in a life form. But it didn't show that spontaneous generation doesn't work what they come up with was that the elements that they used could not have been present in an early Earth. And what about fruit flies? Like Don, I can't remember his last name now, the one scientist that said mutations don't make anything new, they break things. And so when they radiated 2,500 different generations and they bred these for 100 years, 2,500 generations of fruit flies, because fruit flies' lifespan is so short. The only thing they come up with was fruit flies without wings and legs, red or black eyes, extra wings that didn't work so they couldn't fly, all kinds of deformitives, all kinds of mutations that broke things, but they never came up with a super fly or anything else but a fruit fly. Then there's the embryos. The embryos was studied back at Darwin's time when he was still alive, but the guy they know now that put that forth, that every species has a similar beginning stage, so then we must have all come from the same common ancestor on that single tree, has been proven wrong, because they don't look the same at any stage. And then this, of course, was Darwin's sacred cow. It's not Darwin so much as the people that follow him. Everybody wants to go to the Galapagos Islands and look at the finches, because that's one of the things that was in Darwin's report. I don't know if you remember that or not. He found that there were different sized beaks, and he supposed that they had evolved from a single ancestor that was on the mainland. But what did the experiments done in the 1970s actually find out? As they suppose that since in a short span of a few years, they saw the beaks get bigger, they suppose the dotted line would be what would happen, and they would end up with a finch with a super-sized beak, almost like an elephant finch. But what actually happened was they found that as there was a fluctuation in the water supply, in other words, whether there was a heavy rain or whether there was a drought, they were on a swing curve. So the larger beaks, the bigger birds survive simply because, during the drought, simply because they had the ability to eat bigger seeds, and the other ones would die out until the water came back, and then the beaks would go back to average size again. And we looked last time at the first and second law of thermodynamics and the law of conservation of energy. What does that say? And there's supposed to be another, I don't know why it didn't get copied over. There's that car, and I had another one of the same model that was all rusted, etc. The laws of thermodynamics, one of them says that nothing can be created or destroyed, which is what this picture's indicating. You burn a fire, burn your wood. It doesn't get destroyed, it just changes states. And also that matter and energy starts out in order and goes towards disorder, okay? Whether it's the car eventually rusting or whether it's the water being cooled down by the ice, things become disordered, not the other way around. And it has to be that things go from disorder to order if evolution is going to be true. So, why is it so important to many to believe these things when the evidence seems to be pointing another direction? What was one of the main reasons we said why people so earnestly want to believe that the evolutionary process is true? You remember? I got 4 quotes I'm going to do here in just a second to refresh your memory. It's a it's a thinking type philosophy difference, not a scientific difference. If you've got a certain philosophy and you want to stick with it, you can look at the evidence and interpret it in a way that goes along with your philosophy. Or you can look at the evidence in such a way where you make a choice as to which way the evidence seems to point. All right? That's two different ways of looking at the evidence. But as George Wald says, we choose to believe the impossible, that right life arose by chance. How come he said that? Because we don't believe philosophically that creation is possible. We don't think there can be a God because we can't see him. And we don't want to. According to guys like Thomas Nagel, I want atheism to be true and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-known people I know are religious. It isn't that I don't believe in God, and naturally I hope that I'm right. It's I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. Even the great Stephen Hawkins. One can't prove that God doesn't exist, but science makes God unnecessary. They're looking for a way to make God not necessary. That's their whole push. And in order for them to believe it and be taken seriously, they push it through science. And that has happened since at least the 1800s and earlier. That's why Darwinism caught on in the first place. The laws of physics can explain the universe without the need of a creator. And even the late Carl Sagan, he's passed away now, who is more humble? The scientist who looks at the universe with an open mind and accepts whatever the universe has to teach? Or somebody who says everything is in this book, but must be considered the literal literal truth, and never mind the fallibility of the human beings involved? What book is he talking about? The Bible. He doesn't want the Bible to be true. Why don't these people want the Bible to be true, and why don't these people want there to be a God? This is not a hard question. They don't want the responsibility. They don't want to be called into account for the actions and the things that they do. They want to be only the responsible for their own lifestyle. It isn't any different than Eve in the Bible. God said to Adam and Eve, you need to do this and this, you can live with me forever. Please don't break this law. And they did because they were fooled by Satan, and they didn't want God to basically tell them what to do. These people are doing the same thing. So they invent whatever they can to get around the fact so they don't have to believe that. So the next question. This is our transition point. Does anything we discussed over the last 16 weeks prove that there is a God? No, it doesn't. But does anything we discussed over the last 16 weeks prove that evolution is either true or false? No, it does not. Which way do you think that the evidence points is what I'm hoping only to get out of that first part of the class? Do you think that the evidence points towards a mindless, godless, by chance, mutation-driven accident? Or do you think the universe looks like it was designed by a mind that was smarter than us, bigger than us? All right? I'm hoping you have a conclusion on that by now. Do you? I think you guys do, right? I think you have a conclusion on that by now. But deciding that the evidence points to a mind coming first is not the end of this journey. Some people think it is. I think I used to years ago myself. It's not the end, it's only the beginning, so to speak. So, does belief in a mind coming first, and matter was created automatically make us a Christian? If we simply say, I think a mind came first, I think evolution is wrong, and that matter was created by this mind, does that automatically make us a Christian? Not by a long shot. There are a lot of people that believe that, and they are far from being Christians. Okay? I'm not saying they're not good people, I'm just saying they're not Christians. We're going to define what that means as we go along. Does it automatically make you believe that the Bible is true? Does all the stuff we've done for the last 16 weeks automatically make us think that the Bible is true? What do you think?
Well, say no.
You are correct. It doesn't automatically make us think that the Bible is true. Now, the problem is that I'm talking to several people here that have gone to church their whole lives, and they tend to want to believe the Bible is true. I'm talking about, what if you never heard of any of this? They presented all these things, and you decided that there must be a mind, but you've never even heard of the Bible. When I was teaching, we used to have some students come in that were foreign exchange students. I don't know if you've ever met any foreign exchange student. We had one come in from Japan. Nice girl. Couldn't hardly speak English. Had never heard of Jesus in the Bible. Never heard. Didn't know what we were talking about. Because where she came from, the religion was Shintoism. Not only didn't she just not know something about it, she never even heard of it. There are people in the world like that, and there are people in this country that are almost like that, in the United States. Okay? So does it automatically make you believe the Bible is true? I don't think that it does. I don't think that it does at all. Does it even automatically follow that you believe there is a God as described in the Bible? No, I don't think so either. Here's the reason why. There's a lot of Buddhists in the world. They don't have no gods. What they have is supernatural people that either help you or hinder you. There are Hindu people. They have 330 million gods. Now, a lot of them are variations of other gods, but they have 330 million gods. Why would the God of the Bible be any more special to them than the 330 million that they already have? The ancient Mesopotamians and the ancient Egyptians had about 3,000 gods each. Now, why am I mentioning ancient cultures? There's people nowadays that are still following. I've seen it, I've read about it. When I taught Exodus class, I actually showed slides of some of the people that dress up like and act like they are Egyptians and worship those gods now, at present time. In fact, if I remember right, there are some games on some of the gaming programs pattern themselves after the Egyptians and the Egyptian gods. There's pantheism. Pantheism doesn't have a single God. Pantheism is, instead, the whole universe is divine. Everything is God. There's people in the world that are pantheists, all right? Which means God is in you, and God is in you, and God is in that plant, and God is in that building back there. God is in that flower, and we're all one. Pantheism. There are certain sects of the American Indians that were pantheistic, right? Which is why they called it the Mother Earth. And then we talked about Shintoism, which is basically mostly from Japan, where there's 8 million gods. I'm only listing a very small number. What I'm trying to show you is just because all of a sudden we think there was a mind first doesn't automatically make anybody think, shouldn't automatically make anybody think that Christianity and the Bible are the right ones. How do we figure that out? That's what the second part of this course is going to be about. All right? If we decide that the evidence points to a designer then how do we know which one of these gods did the designing? Or whether it was even a god at all? The term intelligent designer refers to a hypothetical entity. This is on Google AI. Intelligent designer refers to a hypothetical entity that the intelligent design movement suggests played a role in creation. The ID movement does not identify the designer. And there are a lot of scientists that know that there's design behind this universe. They know that there had to have been a mind first, but they still refuse to believe in the God of the Bible. They don't know what that mind is. They don't even care, in some cases, what that mind is. They just know that it has to be. So the intelligent design movement does not necessarily show that you believe in a God, let alone the God of the Bible. In fact, Wikipedia puts it this way: an intelligent designer is the pseudo-scientific hypothetical. What does pseudo-scientific hypothetical mean? Pseudo-scientific means sorcery or magic. Hypothetical means probably not true. So, an intelligent designer is a sorcery magic type, probably not true, willed and self-aware entity that the intelligent design movement argues had some role in the origin and or development of life. In other words, Wikipedia is taking the opposite side and trying to be nice about us, saying these people are crazy. Okay? In other words, they're trying to make it spooky and hocus pocus. Do any of the above religions that we just mentioned, or any of the other ones, or the intelligent design movement itself, believe that the man named Jesus was God? That's an important question that most people have an opinion on in the vast majority of the earth. I don't care what religion you are, have the same opinion. What does the mass majority of the people on earth think about what Jesus was? Do they think he was a God? A part of the Godhead? They think he was a man. They think he was a good teacher, just like Muhammad, just like Mother Teresa, just like, what's that guy from India that was in, that was in prison for so many, South Africa, that was in prison for so many years. I'm trying to remember his name. Nelson Mandela. Okay? He's a good man. Good books are written about him so that he has a good message and we ought to live by it. That is what a lot of people think of Jesus. They don't think of him as the Son of God, but the Bible claims he is. Jesus himself claimed he was. So this is in stark contrast to what most of the world believes. Even some religions that claim to be Christian do not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Right? Fact is, most major religions believe that Jesus was only a good man and a good teacher. Only Christianity, based on the Old and New Testaments, recognized Jesus as God. Did Jesus really even live? Well, that's pretty much provable now. For a while, years and years ago, before I was born, it was really questioned. But there's enough evidence, and I'm going to show you some of it as we go on this class, that this man Jesus really did live, okay? And that's what the New Testament is being written about him. Now, a lot of people don't think that is accurate, but they know that he lived and he did some of that stuff. Is there evidence that Jesus was more than just a man and that he died and that he was raised? We're going to look at that evidence also. We got a lot to talk about, okay, in the second half. Is there any evidence that the Bible is a book written by some kind of higher power? We're probably going to start there next week and start looking at can the Bible show us, is there enough evidence in the Bible to show us that it was written by somebody outside of space and time? That it was written differently than any other religious book. Hindus, it's written different than the Vedas. Islam, it's written different than the Quran. And on and on and on. There's a difference in how the Bible is written, and these differences, I believe, show that the Bible was written by someone other than men, even though men wrote it. Okay? That's important. Is the whole Bible true? There's a lot of people that say they believe in the Bible, but then they come to places like Genesis and they go, no, I really don't think that that's true. And they start ripping the Bible apart and saying, I believe this part of it, but I don't believe this part of it. We're going to talk about that. Why do they do it? Right? They do it because part of it doesn't align with evolution, and they don't want to look like they're non-scientific, so they have to take parts of the Bible that deal with scientific type stuff and say, I just don't believe that part. They didn't know enough. Well, if it was written by a deity, then it's probably got to be true. Are some parts of it a myth? So the biggest question is, does any of this even matter? I know people that believe in God. I talk to them periodically. They believe in God, but they don't believe that it matters which God you believe in and what you believe about God. Does any of this matter is asking that question. I believe that it does. I want to try to show you why in the second part of this course. Does it matter what kind of God we believe in or what book he wrote? I think it does. All right? Does it matter if the book was written by God or by men? I think it does. But a lot of people don't. These are all challenges you are going to come up against as you talk to people as you go through college, if you do that, as you talk to people in the workplace, friends that you meet, strangers you talk to on the street, they're going to have some of these other ideas. And if you're not prepared for it, you're going to go, never thought about that. Maybe it isn't true. That's why I'm trying to do this, to show you reasons why, at least I believe, that there's evidence that this stuff is true in the Bible. That there is a God. Not just a God, but a God who had a son, and a son who died and raised from the dead for a purpose. Christianity is the only one that teaches that. And if you believe that, you are going to be in the minority. All right? You're going to be in the minority. According to the Bible, Adam and Eve, this is from an article. I better tell you what this article is. This is from an article, it's on the second page. Science reveals evidence about Adam and Eve that they really did exist. All right? And when you read this first part, which we're going to in a second, when you read this first part, we go, yay, science is coming over to our side. But then I'm going to read the second part and see if you think that's true. So, according to the Bible, Adam and Eve were the first man and woman on earth. Man is said to be made out of dust and to have lived in the Garden of Eden, and that everyone descended from a single pair of original ancestors. While this might seem far-fetched, there is now a growing body of evidence that suggests that at least some parts of this story could be true. Archaeologists have found signs that Adam and Eve, Eve and biologists have shown that all humans alive today share a common ancestor. So they can go back and they can look at DNA samples and a bunch of other kind of stuff now scientifically and say, look, these people up here all came from this person back here. And as far as we go back, we can see there's something common. So going back to a single ancestor seems reasonable to some scientific people nowadays. But does that make them believe in God? No, because the article goes on and says this. However, making the Bible fit with modern science. In other words, not making science fit with the Bible, but making the Bible fit with science. We're going to take and do whatever we have to the Bible to make it fit with the science. We're going to change it, reject certain parts. Making the Bible fit with modern science requires throwing out a lot of traditional stories. Not true stories. To them, it's just like tradition. That could mean saying goodbye to the notion that God created Adam and Eve, or even questioning whether our our biblical ancestors were Homo sapien. Maybe Adam and Eve, or this first couple, were something before they were actually true humans. Though the Bible doesn't state it that way. They're forcing the Bible to conform with science so they can still believe that there's no God. Even though they're kind of telling you that the Bible's partially true. Do the writers of this article believe in God? No. Do they believe that the Bible is true? No, they don't. Well, some believers read this kind of article and come away thinking that science has proved that the Bible is only partially true and that Genesis is only crudely describing scientific evolution from a hypothetical pseudoscientific point of view. The answer is that's exactly what's going on. Make sense? Grace? Does that make sense? Remember this guy? We watched a couple of his videos. He's an atheist. He actually made fun of a lot of people that didn't believe like him, Christians and stuff, on his video. This is one of the slides. We didn't get to it, but I wanted to discuss it just a little bit when we got this far. Instead, is evolution atheistic? Now think about that question. Is evolution atheistic? This is what he does to try to show that even if you are religious, you can still be an atheist. I'm sorry. Even if you believe that there is a God, you can believe in evolution. These are the things that he claims. And I gotta find where that starts here. 1. Most mainstream Protestants, Catholics, and Jews accept evolution as a mechanism by which God created the universe. Is that a true statement? Do most people, or a lot of people that are Protestants, Catholics, and Jews, believe that evolution was how God started the universe? The answer to that question is yes. There's a growing massive amount of Christians that believe that evolution was the way that God got people here. Okay? Second one, Clergy Letter Project. This is a bunch of preachers and ministers, etc., and rabbis that got together to support evolution. Is that true? Yeah, it is. There's whole societies like that. These are things that he's saying you should believe in evolution even if you're religious because of these things that I'm mentioning. The third one, more than 50% of evolutionary biologists and paleontologists are religious in some form or another. Is that true? Yeah. Okay. But do these three things prove or disprove anything? No, it doesn't. What about the number 4? Science and religion are non-overlapping ways of looking at the world and should not conflict or interfere with one another. This is the first one that I kind of only half believe. Okay? Because I know what he means by it. He thinks that when science says something is true, then the Bible should be bowing to it, and the Bible is wrong. But he is also saying at the same time that if you take and think about the Bible and you think about science, they're not dealing with the same realm, so they don't really even, it doesn't really even matter what you believe over here as opposed to what you believe over here. But we're going to look at some scientific statements made by the Bible in the second half of the class. And they contradict, in some places, what the evolutionary theory says. If the two contradict each other, do you think that they're non-overlapping? No. I disagree with his statement that he's making here on the non-overlapping part. I agree that science and the Bible are not in disagreement, but I don't do it in the same way that he is. Non-overlapping in this context means that science and religion should never mix. Only science concerns itself with the facts and the evidence of the here and now. We're going to see that that's not true by a lot of examples I'm going to try to show starting next week. Number 5, he says that the Bible tells us how, this is a statement by Pope John Paul II, the Bible tells us how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. I disagree. There are places where the Bible tells us about the heavens and about the earth and about things that science deals with. But Pope John, this is the Pope himself saying, I don't think that science and religion ought to get mixed up with each other. So I can, if you want to believe in evolution, that's fine, but you can still believe in these religious stuff over here as separate, totally separate. And then he says at the end here, this last one, but extreme fundamentalists try to brand anyone accepting evolution as an atheist. So he said all of these things up to the last one to show that there's lots of people that are religious that don't have any problem at all believing in evolution, except for these few fundamentalists over here. What does he mean by fundamentalists? They believe that the Bible is true. They believe that Genesis is the story of creation. They would believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and they would believe that Jesus rose from the dead. Those are fundamentalists. And if you believe those things, he's talking about you. All of these things show that you're wrong because you're an extreme fundamentalist and you're in the minority. That's what he's trying to say. We're going to talk about this idea of Jesus rising from the dead as the most, eventually when we get to it, as the most important issue of this whole class. Okay? So, did God create the universe the way that the Bible states, or was God simply a sort of mind behind the first cause, which began the process we now call evolution today? That is something that is known as deism. Thomas Jefferson was a deist. There's not a lot of deists around right now, but there are some still. But a deist basically said, God sat back one day and went, poof, I made the universe. Then he sat back and he starts doing something else, and he let it evolve, and he never had anything else to do with it. That's what deism is. Okay? Did God create the universe, as the Bible states, or was it simply a sort of mind, was he simply a sort of mind behind the first cause that started the evolutionary process? I do not think that is true. I don't think that's what happened. Are there people that claim to be religious who would say that Don, this scientist, was right? This is a chart from quite a while ago. So it's worse now than it was then. Look at this. The survey asked clergy are like preachers and ministers and priests and that sort of thing, asked the following churches, the ministers, if they agreed with a statement. Scriptures are inspired and inherent word of God, not only in matters of faith, but also in historical, geological, and other secular matters. In other words, when the Bible says something happened, did it happen? When the Bible says something about God, is it true? When the Bible says God created, when the Bible says that there was a flood, do you believe that that's true? What I want you to see is Lutheran Church, 90%. What does that mean? That means that 10% of them don't believe that. What about down here a little bit further? Look at the Methodists. Only 17% of those ministers said they believed that, which means that 83% don't even believe that the Bible's true. And it's worse with Episcopalians. 92% of them don't believe the Bible's true. These are the preachers. And if you were under 35 at the time, the statistics were worse. Less of the younger ones believe it because they've been exposed to what we've been talking about for the last 17 weeks for most of their lives, and they tend to believe that science is right, so I have to make the Bible fit the science. And they're preaching that to the congregations. So, like I said before, we got hopefully to a point where we think that there was a mind, that it's more logical, and the evidence points towards the fact that there was something that is mindful and greater than us that caused these things to happen. We looked at all those different reasons we just summarized in the first half of this class today. But we haven't scratched the surface as to what to actually believe in. Now we're going to start looking at what's most reasonable to believe in, not what's most reasonable not to believe in. And that has to do with trying to show whether or not we think the Bible is true. Whether we think that Jesus was a man, whether we think that Jesus not only died, but he rose from the dead. That's important. All right. That's it for today. Cut off after this, please. I want to ask you guys a question off the record. This won't go on online. Had you ever thought of the kinds of things that I mentioned today? Have you? That's good. Have you? Have there been questions where you wish you had answers to some of those things over the past? Good. Then this class is going in the direction that I hoped it would. Right? I hope you're going to be able to keep on coming because we're going to deal with a lot of different things that I've accumulated over a long period of time. And I think it's going to be very interesting for you. Right?